0 to 100 real quick.
This is 0 to 100
with Natasha and Serena.
Hey everybody, what's up?
Hello, hello.
Welcome to 0 to 100
with Natasha and Serena.
What's going on, Natasha?
You know, just chilling over here in Newcastle upon Tyne, England.
Goodness. How is it?
It's really cool. Like, the city's really cute. It's not like the big city like London, but I think it's way better.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was going to be like a little small town, but it's not. Like, it's apparently a party town that we found out. And my little sister and I are debating about whether or not we're going to, really see how the party scene is. But, with COVID and everything, we were looking at pictures and I was like, yeah, that looks like COVID. That looks like Delta. That looks like we might start a new variant. But I mean, coming from Miami, Florida, how can I?
I know. Nowhere is worse than Florida right now, I feel like.
So. No, I think Texas is worse now.
Really? Okay. We're always competing with Texas on different things. The worst things, really.
Sometimes Georgia.
That's true. That's true.
But so I don't know. In Florida, it's so bad. We stay in the house. We don't risk it. So it's like,
who in Florida?
Me.
Okay.
You.
Yes.
We.
Us. The smart ones. All right.
The smart ones. Yes. She said it, not me, but I did agree with it.
All right. Well, I want to hear more about your trip, but let's go ahead and do our check-in.
Let's do it.
All right.
You hit it.
All right. So what's happening over in my corner of the world? Same old. I just am like, my son has started school, so he's doing really well, which I was so nervous about. But he's doing good. He's taking to it. And so the next thing that I'm like nervous about and having huge anxiety about is like having my second child, which I was just telling my husband the other day that I have so much anxiety, even though and it's crazy because it feels like, is this your first child or it's going to be your first labor? I already know what to expect, but it just feels like now that I know what I'm going to expect, it's even worse. So I don't know. Pray for me. I'm just like anticipating that and trying to get ready for it, and I want it to hurry up and come. But that's what's happening with me. What's happening with you, Natasha?
Well, yeah, I've been here for a week and a half. So the whole plan when I came was that this would be my hard reset. So the example I gave, I don't know if I said it on here, but like when you call and you're having a troubleshooting issue and the first thing they do is they say unplug it or hold the reset button down with a little paper clip or whatever. They say, hold it down for like 30 seconds or 15 seconds. Well, I'm here for 15 days, so this is my 15-day reset. So in the beginning I wasn't doing so well, feeling guilty if I wasn't working and stuff like that. But I think I'm getting in the swing of things right when I'm down to the last week of being here. So I think that's enough time for me to get it together. And that's that. And I will discuss next time all the fun things that I've been doing while I'm here.
Okay. And you can share some pictures with our followers.
Oh, true. Okay, I'll do that.
It'll be cool. All right. So what are we talking about
What are we talking
today?
about it?
I know, we always say the same thing. Today we are going to be talking about the transgender community and some of the issues. We can't cover all of them, but we're going to be talking about some of the issues that they are up against or facing when it comes to equality and acceptance and just existing as people in our society. So we're going to talk about it a little bit. Of course, we're not experts, but we wanted to shed a little bit of light on the topic.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that in a situation where someone is receiving the backlash or, is the victim or whatever, you do want to recognize the issues that they're facing, but this has become a thing that everyone has to incorporate it into their life. So I think we should also kind of take the mindset of this is now something that is going on. It's taking place. It is a change that is going to affect everyone. So we have to think about how it affects those that are not, part of the LGBTQ plus community
Mhm.
that are not trans, and how this may be a quote unquote issue or something that, the way we, like others, have to consider it. You know what I'm saying? Especially when we want to be an ally for them.
Right. Um, so I really wanted to kind of start off with like what or like who is considered to be a transgender person, because a lot of times people seem to be, I don't know if it is um, just their unwillingness to learn or what, but like a lot of people are like, well, I don't even know what it is or da 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 da. So we're gonna clear it up right here. So who is considered to be a transgender person? What does it mean? Transgender is a term that includes the many ways that people's gender identities can be different from the sex they were assigned at birth. There are a lot of different terms transgender people use to describe themselves. For example, you may hear someone shorten it to trans, or trans male, trans female. But it's always just best to use the language and labels that that person prefers, and you can literally just ask them. People will tell you.
Sorry, I was muted. That has become a common phrase now because of Zoom,
I
right?
know. I was gonna say it's like we're on a Zoom call.
Okay, so people often confuse gender identity with sexual orientation. And,
Mhm.
I've done it myself. So that's why we want to kind of pull this back a little bit and give you guys the info, like Serena said. So being transgender isn't the same thing as, being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Your gender identity, whether transgender or cisgender, is about who you are inside as male, female, both, or none of these. Being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or straight describes who you're attracted to and who you feel yourself drawn to romantically, emotionally, and sexually. A transgender person can be gay, lesbian, straight, or bisexual, just like someone that's cisgender. A simple way to think about it is that sexual orientation is about who you want to be with, and your gender identity is who you are.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in when people are trying to figure out what what is what. And it's literally just it's another case of don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid. Obviously, you want to be respectful and you don't want to be you know you don't want to disrespect someone and their identity, but it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to say, what is this? The internet has a plethora of information. You can always Google as well.
Before we transition away from the the difference there, I think a common, like, something that I didn't really understand was transgender versus transsexual.
Hmm.
And I think the easiest way to describe it is that, like, transgender is kind of like, the umbrella. So transgender covers someone who was born so like someone who was born male, but they say I identify and I like see myself as a female. So they would be transgender, just that alone. Transsexual means that so like that's within the umbrella, or under transgender, but it's more specific. And apparently, I had to learn this by, again, asking questions, that transsexual can be contentious. And you are only to use
Mm.
it if someone specifically asks you to refer to them as such.
Wow. Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't
so
know that.
I was very black and white. And I thought, okay, well, transgender, that's if you say, I was born this, but I identify as that. Transsexual is if you had, like an actual operation and you are now consistent with what um, you know, someone born as a female, like the parts that she has, now you have those parts. I thought that that's what it was. Just being
Me too.
transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so apparently transgender covers all of that. It's the umbrella. Um, and apparently it can mean different things to different people, and there are other labels like within it, but it does include everyone. And that's why I would get confused when someone would be like, "Oh, this person's, oh, they're trans," and I would be like, "Oh, but like transgender, transsexual." It's like, "Oh, well, transgender." It's like, yeah, but like which one? Like I'm wanting to
Mhm.
understand, like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that that's a good way to just get it. Like transgender is what the person identifies as. They were born this and they have transitioned to the another gender. Either it's male, female, like they're either born male, female, or intersex,
Mhm.
and have they identify or have a gender that is different than that, like what they
Right.
were born as, whatever was assigned to them at birth.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So along with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the issues that the transgender community may be facing, specifically legally, culturally, and some of the ways that you might be even hearing in your life things come up in the news or things come up as far as conversation. One of the biggest things I think are transgender and sports, and specifically when it comes to uh, female transgender competing in female athletics or female sports and on teams. Um, right now, a lot of states are in the process of deciding or have decided whether they can play sports with the gender they identify with. Um, and again, specifically, the issue lies more with female sports than males. So the question that a lot of people are asking are, can males who transition play in an all-female sport? Is it fair? Um, right here in Florida, I know Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill recently. I don't even know if the ink is dry on it, that bans transgender athletes from participating in girls and women's sports. And it was called or dubbed the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. And I believe the governor of Louisiana also are in was there a bill like that came up in Louisiana, and the governor there struck down that bill saying it was discriminatory. And there's a lot of conversation about it. I know, I think it was like Dave Chappelle or someone who like said it in their stand up routine, where he was just saying like, what if LeBron were to transition? Should he be able to play like in the WNBA? Like what that would look like. So like I wanted to just kind of have a discussion about like, what do you think it's fair? What is the solution? Is there a middle ground, or is it like a yes or a no kind of thing?
Well, so I remember having this discussion years ago when it was not before any of the courts, but it was just starting to be discussed, like, in the news and stuff like that. And um, my dad actually posed the question and he was asking about it. And I was like, no. Like, it was something I had kind of thought, through in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, I don't think it's fair. And I remember his response, being something along the lines of, but how's that fair to them? So they don't get sports because they identify as something other than what they were born. And I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think that, and this is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, because it's not just the issues that LGBTQ plus community and those that specifically are trans face, but it's the bigger picture of how this affects everyone. Because, and I remember saying to him that at the time my baby sister was in high school playing volleyball, but she was like a beast. And she was, nationally ranked and she was killing it. So this was at the time when she was killing it there in the like about to transition to college on a scholarship for volleyball. And I remember saying, like, how would that be fair to her? Like, we watched her blossom and work so hard in the sport and give it her all. But now she goes to college and her skills are for naught because we know scientifically those born male have more testosterone. They're
Mm-hmm.
generally, men are going to be taller than women. Those are not things that are debatable.
Right.
So for a sport like volleyball, where height is like mandatory, and certain agility and physical abilities that biological men, are born with, that's going to give them an advantage over female players. And I just think that it's not fair to them, because then it's like saying, well, sorry that you identify as the gender that you were born, but this is just how it has to go.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, I can't like watch. It's not that it's me and me saying, no, but no fair. I work so hard. I'm never gonna be able to win like that. I wouldn't have that attitude. I would probably be like, ugh, okay, it's gonna be a little harder, whatever. But to see someone that it's that's my baby sister. So there's a level of like protection over her.
Right.
So for me to see that from that vantage point and say, y'all boys ain't gonna come over here
Right.
and mess up her game. No, she's worked too hard. So, and it's, and I say boys just because, we're
Right.
identifying them as the gender that they are born, because there's science there. So while everyone can have their opinion and their belief with regard to how this identification process happens for a person, I don't agree with some people who are very judgmental, because until you walk in their shoes, you cannot pretend to say that, someone doesn't actually feel that way, or that that's not true to them, or that that's not possible because you don't feel that way. That's
Right.
ridiculous. But the science is there. We can see that. We know that the gender that you are assigned at birth is based upon stuff that's not disputable. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I just I don't understand how that would even be possible. And females are the only ones that will get the short end of the stick.
Right. Exactly.
Women are not going to then go into male only sports because they now identify as a man and cause any kind of ruckus for them. That's why female sports essentially were designed.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not okay with that. Like I'm not. And what the solution is, I don't know, because I know that it's all about inclusion, and it's not to, like some. I would imagine that someone who is transgender would not want to be, like, they will want to blend as whatever they identify as, and I respect that. So I'm not saying that now there's like a separate trans Olympics or trans. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I don't know what the solution is, but I don't think that it's fair to penalize someone who does identify as the gender they were assigned at birth, that now they are penalized or get the short end of the stick.
Yeah. To me though, like I don't know, it just seems like inclusion um would be if a male was transitioning to a woman, that they still play with in the male league. Like if it were, we're talking about NBA, like if you know, Dave Chappelle used the example of if LeBron were to transition, like why wouldn't he just stay on the team that he's on? Why would he have to Why would he have to go to the WNBA?
Because he's not. Because that's for men only. He's not a man.
Yeah, he identified
And
as
then
a woman.
because transgender is like such a big umbrella, there are some transgender that maintain their, natural, like whatever's going on inside, hormonal, like whatever their situation is, they don't take any supplements or medications to change that. They just identify as, and maybe
Yeah,
dress
so
differently or whatever.
to me,
But there are some that do take,
yeah,
hormones. So they're not going to LeBron, who either if he were to be transgender and take any type of hormonal pills or whatever, any type of supplements, or have like a actual surgery and like have a sex change, he would not be the same Ron that we know.
right.
So
Yeah, I
it's
don't know.
like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I don't know. It is very tricky. I don't agree with um, you know, females having to to compete against people who are, like you said, it's science, like biologically or physically, like there is a difference there. Whether we want to say like, oh, women, we can do everything, there is a physical difference there. So I also don't agree. I don't know what the solution is. Like the only thing I ever have come up in my head is, a separate league or sport, but also again that's not very inclusive. So I don't know, but again, like you said, women would get the short end of the stick, and sometimes you still see, we talk about different types of privilege, and um, specifically with white males, you still see that privilege even if they become a member of a group that is um, considered to be a minority. I mean, we see it all the time. We see it, I think, with Caitlyn Jenner, um, who still identifies, is very conservative, and still kind of identifies as like a white male, even though she is now considered, is a very popular transgender woman leading the way. Still kind of identifies with those old ways of thinking, and um, conservative ways of thinking. So I think there's a little bit of that too, and I think we have to. It's just a complicated situation to me. But I don't think we should just be like, oh well, they're women now, they're female now, they should just be able to compete against women, like you said. Like you think about women who have worked really hard to be at the top of their sport. That's like a huge now. I mean, they haven't even trained for that. Like in order to, I mean, people look at their opponents and they train based on, okay, I need to beat this time, or I need to do this, I need to do that. And then just to be able, then to have this curveball thrown in where they're like, okay, wait, um, what about all my hard work? So I don't know if
Yeah,
there is a solution.
I don't either, but I think that um, kind of need to wrap our head around one, because when you have some people that are very, very, very passionate, no, we or they need to be able to fill in the blank. You can't just say, no, they shouldn't. It needs to be, no, this is how it should go. And I think that this is another opportunity to discuss disabilities in
Hmm.
a way of that's it just is what it is. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's not to say that, you are not as good as someone who doesn't have a disability because you have a disability. But at the same time, someone with, like a physical disability, for example, is not going to be able to do the physical things that someone without a physical disability can do.
Right.
So inclusion of those with disabilities is making accommodations or making certain things, be accessible to those with said disability. And that's how it's protected. So I don't think that that is a bad thing. And I think that, it's more about inclusion and accepting everyone, regardless of their differences, within reason.
Right.
And if someone is trans, I think that that is more than like acceptable, and it's your choice and they should have that choice. However, there has to be some level of understanding that because you identify as something other than what you were born as, you cannot have the same things straight across the board as someone who was born a certain gender. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I feel like gender identity, if it's important enough for someone to fight for the ability to change the gender that they were assigned at birth, then it's important enough, to be protected.
Right.
So you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like if we're just talking about sports, then yeah, I mean, you're different than someone who does identify as the gender that they were assigned at birth. And if you want to compete, then there needs to be some other league or something else designed so that everyone still has an opportunity to compete.
Right.
because when they had male basketball and women were like, wait a minute, we want to play too. They didn't say, okay, well, we have to make it co ed. They developed a whole another league of every sport for women.
Right.
So why was that okay? But now, when women are trying to protect their interests, it's like, oh, but that's no, you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm willing to speak up in this situation and say, well, no, because it's different. So there has to be something else created new because this is new. Like it can't come and just immediately like entirely eliminate
Right.
because it would. It would almost eliminate the league as we know it
It
of
would.
anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, when those with physical disabilities that said, well, we want to do sports too, they created, like the Paralympics, or, they created other leagues and avenues for them to be able to, yeah, you should be able to play sports. Let's do this for you. Let's make certain changes and accommodations to allow for this to happen for you because you're right, you do deserve it as well. But it's not to say like that would be impossible to have the NBA as we know it, but you have LeBron and whomever playing, but you also have like someone in a wheelchair or like it just that would change everything.
Hmm. I don't know, man. It's one of those things. It's just, it is important that we come up with some sort of solution and start thinking about it and working towards one. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I know just like with everything, every side is very adamant about what their position is and what they want to see happen. And a lot of times there's a lot of thinking without thinking thinking from one side instead of thinking by looking at the whole picture. So I hope that eventually there is a solution, but we'll see. We'll watch
Yeah,
it play
I
out.
think that like, when we do our episodes on mental health, it really all starts from just eliminating the stigmas and having a conversation about it. Open it up to conversation, like creating a safe place for people to honestly discuss potential issues and everyone's feelings. So, not just one specific class, but everyone that may be affected. And it doesn't have to come from a place of, any type of phobia or hate or whatever. It doesn't have to be a disrespectful type of conversation, but it needs to be honest and it needs to be open. And it just has to start
Yeah.
in order for the solution to come from it.
Yeah.
But like even going beyond sports, I think about like the workplace and stuff because it's another form of discrimination because that is a class that is advocating and fighting for inclusion and rights.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it also makes me think about what was it, Rachel Dolezal? You remember
Dolezal.
her?
Yeah.
What was it? What was her name?
I think it was Dolezal or something like
Yeah,
that.
something. But she said she identified as another race and she got dragged and
Mm-hmm.
canceled for that. And it's like, well, what I mean, a protected class is afforded some protection and benefits that a privileged or non-protected class, which it wouldn't be non-protected because it doesn't need the protection. That's the whole point. Would not get. So it's like you look at that and you're like, oh, you're utilizing protections and
Mm-hmm.
opportunities and things that were designed for a minority class. But I was kind of like, well, I don't blame her being black, kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But it's like, I'm not saying that I didn't have an issue with what she was doing, but why wasn't she allowed to identify
Right.
with what she felt
Yeah.
like she wanted to identify as, but then someone can identify as a different gender? Like, is gender more acceptable than race? Because it's still assigned at birth. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And then how does this play into those like opportunities and things that are afforded to those in a protected class when it comes to transgender? Like, are we going to have issue with men who transition to female and someone says, oh, they're just doing it so that they have whatever access to whatever, I don't know, scholarships, jobs because of their race?
Right.
or sorry, gender, because of the gender that they identify as or have transitioned to. What do you think about that?
Hmm. Um, that's another, I don't know. I mean, I don't, again, like when you think about um, someone coming from a more privileged group or class and going to one, like you said, that's protected or gets, you know, receives like that, things like that, like scholarships or certain designations or whatever, it does look and seem unfair. I don't know that. Um, I don't feel like I would be okay with, again, it would feel like if I saw a transgender female come in and grab a scholarship that was meant for, another female woman or student or whatever it is, to me, it just would feel and look unfair. Um,
But why though? Because if they're living as a woman, regardless of what they were assigned as birth, just because they, quote unquote, we may look at it and be like, oh, but you chose to be a woman and we
mhm,
had to deal with this. But it's like, I'm sure they would say, like, no, I didn't choose this. Like, this is how I always felt. Or, that's just what I imagine from the conversations that I've had, that it
mhm,
wasn't just like, oh, let me test out this being a woman thing. And I didn't see it personally, but, dang, I say Christian or Caitlyn Jenner. Jenner. She said something along those lines that she always kind of felt like that and wanted to, but then she almost like went harder at being a man and into sports and stuff, trying to, get away from what she was actually feeling inside. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
it's like if they're still like if someone says I transition um to female or whatever, then wouldn't they have to deal with the same issues that women deal with that were assigned women at birth? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
why isn't it fair?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I feel like you would have to, I would need to, I like to always get insight from people who are actually living it. I don't know that I have gotten that. Like I like to see story, like to me, I like to see personal stories to me, I would just have to do more research and look at individuals and see, okay, for me to understand, okay, what is this person really dealing with? What is this group really dealing with? And what are the things that I don't know because I don't live it? Like I don't, I can make a judgment from my point of view and from my world
Yeah.
and what I feel and think is fair. But again, it's just like I know as being an African American, a lot of white people tend to say, well, you don't, da da da. And I'm like, how do you know? Do you walk in my shoes? You don't see what I see on a daily
Yeah.
basis. And so it's the exact same way. So I never want to make a judgment call unless I know I'm able to see those stories up
Yeah.
close, which is what I'd like to see a little bit more of, in
Sharing
our
that
culture.
information.
Yeah. Um, I think that would truly be helpful for a lot of people who are like me, who are just like, I understand, but also this doesn't seem fair, or I don't get this part, or whatever. It would um, for um, help us to become better allies.
Yeah. And I think another thing that people struggle with, that a lot of people just do not, they look at it as a choice versus someone who is like has a disability, or um, like your rate, like if you're born a minority, or you know what I'm saying, like they. So I think that understanding from someone who can say firsthand, like this is how this is looked for me, this is what I had to deal with. I think that it would for everybody, not just for you. And I think that they need to get creative and present it in a way that's palatable, and people that aren't seeking that information, even, you know what I'm saying, like they
Right.
can get to it, like it will be presented to them. I don't know, stories in the news or whatever, so that it reaches other people, not just those that are on Instagram and TikTok, and like we see it there. But I don't watch TV though. But I don't, like I don't think I've heard of stuff like that being on television. But before we move on from the workplace, I want to say that despite a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that made it clear and decided that trans people are legally protected from discrimination in the workplace, there's still no comprehensive federal non discrimination law that includes gender identity, which means that trans people may still lack recourse if that they face discrimination when seeking housing or dining in a restaurant, which is changing, like you talked about. Moreover, state legislature across the country, they're debating, and in some cases, they are passing legislation specifically designed to prohibit trans people from accessing public bathrooms that
Mm-hmm.
correspond with our gender identity, or with their gender identity, or creating exemptions based on religious beliefs, and those would allow discrimination against LGBTQ plus. So basically, I mean, if you're creating exemptions and the opportunity for those who don't care to like avoid it or intentionally want to be discriminatory, they can. And we all know that um, the LGBTQ plus community as a whole, but specifically trans people, I mean, we've seen it in popular shows. I can't think of the name of the one that my friend turned me on to, but they deal with a lot of hate, like crimes, like violence against them. And I mean, there are statistics that actually say that trans people experience violence at rates that are far greater than the average person. Over a majority, which is 54% of trans people, have experienced some form of intimate partner violence. We gotta talk about that. 47% have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and nearly 1 in 10 were physically assaulted between 2014 and 2015. So I don't know. Maybe the numbers have gone down since then, but it's I mean, this type of violence is fatal. This is not okay. You know what I'm saying? So at least 27 trans and gender nonconforming people have been violently killed in that was not even at the end of 2020 when that statistics. I think that was like mid 2020. And 27 had already been killed, and the same number of fatalities were observed the year before in 2019.
Right, and according to data collected by the National Center for Transgender Equality, 23 of the victims were transgender women, four were transgender men, um, and one was non binary. And the epidemic of violence is particularly pronounced for Black and Latina trans women, is what we're finding. So I think it's really important for us to really discuss some of the violence that transgender people are experiencing. In some instances, um, not all instances, but in some, we are seeing violence when a transgender person dates, specifically. And so, I kind of want to touch on dating, and what the protocol should be there. First of all, violence, murder, is never okay. I think there's always a better way um, to deal with something and to step back before making a decision that can change your life and someone else's life. But we're seeing it at crazy rates.
Right, and it's been in the news. I mean, there was that 18-year-old Virginia Tech football player that punched and stomped his Tinder match to death
Right.
when he learned that who he thought was a female was actually a man,
Right. I think he
or
was dating.
was assigned the gender as
Yeah, I think he had gone on a Tinder date, and it
yeah.
was with a 40-year-old man, transgender female, and at some point, I think I read in the story that they had engaged in some sort of sexual activity
Mm-hmm.
already, and and at some point, um, the 18-year-old football player discovered that his date was actually a male, was assigned being a male at birth, and so he went to that person's home, attacked him, and then left him there to die. And he did. He passed away in his home alone. And so that 18-year-old has now been charged with second-degree murder. He is out on bond until court appearance
This
later
month.
this year. Yeah, this month
Mm-hmm.
actually,
So this
September.
month, yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, this story to me, I read it and my heart breaks um, all the way around. And there's so many different angles that I think of. I mean, first of all, this is why I think we need to start educating young kids on, first of all, being responsible sexually. Why you shouldn't just like hook up with people that you really don't know. But that's my personal feelings. And because I feel like this could have, like, why didn't you get to know them? Why so quick to engage in the sexual activity? And now you're like, well, this isn't who I thought it was. I mean, it could be more. It could be something that he thought was um, less hurtful or scary than him finding out that his date was a transgender. He could have found out that he was a psycho. I don't know, but like, why you took the risk of engaging in a sexual activity with someone that you didn't really know, and so it's, to me, not a shocker that you would find something out that's shocking to you. Um, I don't know. To me, I just feel like get to know the person, but also I feel like I do understand where he feels like I didn't. I feel like this person should have disclosed to me so that I could have made the decision whether or not I wanted to engage in sexual activity with this type of person. So I don't know. I see both sides.
I do, but the more and more I think about it, I don't I still don't know, but I think that my opinion on it is like I don't have a hard opinion. It's still developing. And here's why. I think that we know and we can agree that times change, like things change. So let's say, okay, like adultery is a sin. You're not supposed to do it, it's wrong, right? In some places, you were punished criminally for it. But now, everybody cheat. It's socially accepted. They brag about it, they talk about it, they accept it. People have their opinions, whether or not it should be okay or it shouldn't or whatever. So, at a minimum, it's not criminal, at least not here.
Right.
But that's something that changed over time. So I think that if we go back to even 15 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe whatever, someone who was born one gender and identifies as another, so maybe they're transgender. Um, I think back then it would have been like, oh well, immediately they're placed in the class of like, what, like you're gay or you're whatever that gender you were assigned at birth, like that's what you are. So then, if someone else who identifies as cisgender and straight is attracted to them, they would think like, oh, well, I'm not gay, so they have to like fight against that. You know what I'm saying? But I think now it's becoming more accepted because it's more understood. We have social media, we're exposed to things outside of our immediate circle, and we're able to have open dialogue and discussions with people that think differently than us. And it creates a level of acceptance. So if someone, I don't know, I get why I probably would be like, what, WTF, I wanted to know, but I mean, is it fair for the person not to just come out and tell you that? You didn't ask.
Right.
So, I mean, if someone, like, I literally have gone out with someone and then found out later that they were married and been like, that's Minnesota trifling. And they said, well, did you ask them? Well, hold on now. Those are not my vows. I have no duty to investigate whether or not you are a stand up person that wouldn't go out on a date while you're married. It's fair for me to assume. However, after that experience, now I know that guys are trifling as hell and they do stuff like that. Then if I have like something that makes me suspicious, like I see a random girl, someone be like, "You're you married?" You know what I'm saying? So it's like now, or I might have said like, "Well, I don't care if you're married. If he ain't gonna say nothing, I ain't gonna ask." Then that's me accepting, and I can't really get mad if I found out later on when I didn't even ask. So I think that there has to be some like responsibility on the other person, because it's not fair when something has become so acceptable now that the person who is already dealing with all of this, literally living as, a gender that they didn't identify as, they've made the transition, maybe they recently just made it, and all they want to do is just live a life that makes them happy, which is as this, gender that they are now living as. Like, imagine that date. Every single time you go on a date, you got to be like, oh, and by the way, I was born a woman. I have not had a sex change. I'm working towards it. Or I have had a sex change. However, I just know that I need to tell you. That's not fair. But if you are someone who that is a deal breaker for you, the same as if it's a deal breaker for me that I don't want to date someone that has children already, then I need to ask. And if they lie, then that's a whole nother story. So the question may then be, well, are they obligated? Is the transgender person obligated to tell the truth? I'd say absolutely. You absolutely need to tell the truth.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think, because I try to put myself in their shoes. If I was born a man and from, an early age felt like I was a woman, made the transition, and now I'm living as a woman, look like a woman, no one ever thinks that I'm a man, I'm comfortable, I'm finally living my own, and now I'm expected to go on a date when the dating pool is already so trash and basically ruin my chances, because even though a man may not care, once he gets to know me and has realized that, no, like, I like her, I vibe with her, he basically is like, oh, I'm not allowed to be okay with this, because if I'm okay with it, then that means that I'm gay.
Right.
But if we're dating and it's cool and it's like, oh, I feel like this is probably a time where I should probably have this discussion, even though he hasn't asked, then maybe I'll do it. But I don't think it should be an obligation on me to just come out and be like, hey, I know it's date one, but apparently I have to say this. I was born a man. And then get walked out on every time. Like, how, that's so damaging to someone's mental health. And,
Yeah.
I can't put that on them.
Yeah.
So I think that because it's happening, we all know that it's happening. We can look up, the percentage of people that are transgender, and you've heard stories at this point. I've heard a few from people who have gone on dates or met someone and then find out later that they were a man and couldn't believe it because they look so much like a woman, like you couldn't even tell. So, well, then ask, because for some people, it's not a deal breaker.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, we can't put the burden, as much as we want to say, oh, this person should disclose and da 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 da. I don't think it is on that person to disclose anything. I think if you need to think about what you care about as a person. Do you care if you have a sexual experience with someone and then you find something out about them that you didn't know after? If you don't, then fine, don't ask questions. But if you do, if you would feel like you would have this type of reaction, I mean, I don't think anybody knows they would have this type of reaction, which is terrible. It's the worst case scenario. But if you feel like you would be upset or hurt or whatever, then I think it's on you to know yourself and to say, okay, these are the questions that I want to ask, that I
Yeah.
want to know before I
Yeah.
engage in sexual activity with someone. Which I think it's not just in the transgender world. It's like it's
Yes,
a
I was
lot
just
of
gonna say
things that
that.
you need, that you would want to know, that you would feel like I would feel upset if I found this out after I engage in a sexual act with someone.
Yes.
Ask those questions. Know
I think
yourself.
that's what needs to be
Right.
normalized.
Right.
Need
And
to
I
normalize having conversations and knowing more about people before you
exactly.
just have sex. And if you are down to, if we're just kicking it, we're just having casual sex or whatever, and that's what you're down for, then you have to also understand that it's casual for them too.
Right.
So why do
Exactly.
they have to disclose like everything? Because you wanted to know. Well, if you wanted to know so bad, why didn't you ask?
Right. Right.
That's like ordering a meal. It doesn't list the ingredients. You're allergic to peanuts, and nothing. Like, you don't say, "Does this have peanuts in it?"
Right.
And then get mad at the restaurant. How is someone supposed to read your mind?
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely think at young ages we need to be explaining this to kids, but that's a whole nother story about sex education and what we tell our
That is,
kids and
especially
all
you with
that.
having a son.
Right, exactly. And I think about it now because it is more relevant and prevalent now in today's society and culture. So it's like these are conversations that need to be had, and you need to say, and it's not just, you know, don't, scare and fear and saying, well, you might run into this, just saying, like, you need to be fully educated. Sex is Sex is a very serious thing. I know you see in culture and music and videos and all that, it feels like it's not. It is serious. And so you need to understand as yourself as a person what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, and make decisions, good choices based on that. Um, and understand that there's consequences. If I mean, we all go out and make mistakes. We all go out and do things we wish we hadn't done. But we have to understand that there's consequences and that we have to be ready to, deal with those consequences if we
Right.
make the wrong decision, and be okay
Yeah.
with it.
Hmm. And understand that sometimes things can happen that were a good decision at that moment or seem like a good decision, and then it turns out that it didn't work out the way that
Hmm.
you want. That's life.
Yep.
Like, I mean, but I mean, you don't get to just get mad because
Yeah.
someone else didn't do what you wanted them to do or say
Yeah.
what you wanted them to say. Like, that's
Yeah.
just, it's not fair. And people need to take more accountability
Yeah.
for themselves. And I mean, so we talked about sports, we talked about dating, like with the whole bathroom thing. I thought we were going to co ed bathrooms by now. I've been to a couple, like, um, I think they were all nightclubs, maybe one restaurant where it was co-ed, and basically it's like each individual bathroom has its own like little door, and then it's all open, and there's just like a long thing of sinks and you wash your hands. I personally like that better because a lot of things can happen in bathrooms because they're kind of closed off.
Hmm.
So I like the fact that it was kind of open, but you have privacy, and the one place you need privacy, which is where the toilet is. um, so I don't know, I thought we were moving towards that anyway, but I don't know.
Yeah. I
I think
don't.
that
Yeah.
this is the start of, I think this is the start of like what's to come. Like, I
Yeah.
definitely think we're
Definitely.
gonna come back. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
So let us know what y'all think
Yeah, and I'd like to,
and
like,
your opinions on this.
one day, hear from people who, like I said, personal stories. Like, I want to hear from people in the actual community. And I mean, if you're listening, and you heard something, definitely DM us, email us, so that we can, um, educate ourselves and learn and grow more.
And I think that our listening population is probably mainly like around late-ish 20s, 30s. Um, but I think we're kind of like in the middle of this. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it might be worthwhile hearing from someone like a Gen Zer, and like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about this? Like, what are like, how do you think that someone should have, like, those same kind of questions, and get their opinion versus someone that's like our grandparents' age.
Right.
You
True.
know it's going to be so different, but I don't know. I think that that would be interesting. But let us know if you want to hear that, or if you don't, we'll probably still do it. But um, if you do want to hear it, then maybe we'll for sure do it. So
Yeah.
I think that's it. That's
Yeah.
all I got to say about that.
Yeah. And as always, make sure you download, share, and follow us.
Like,
Our
comment,
Yeah, all of those things. Um, and until next
and
time.
as a reminder,
Oh,
we're on Spotify,
yes.
on Apple Podcasts, and we're also on YouTube. Even though, in light of COVID and restrictions in place, we are not videotaping, but they are still available on YouTube. I actually just told someone that yesterday. They were like, "Oh, you're still on YouTube?" Yes, we are everywhere.
Yeah.
So every other week, new episode. So don't miss one. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Cheers.